Hello, it's me, Christine. Welcome to my little crime corner. We are in Bellevue, Idaho today, which is a small town in the Sawtooth Mountains. This town is considered to be very safe, and many parents with small children choose to raise their families here. One of those families was the Johnson family. Alan and Diane lived here with their 16-year-old daughter, Sarah. They also had a 22-year-old son named Matthew, but he was currently away at college, so Sarah was enjoying the only child life. Bellevue is an exceptionally safe city where people felt so at ease, they often didn't lock their doors. This may work for a time, but sooner or later, this would prove to be trouble. At 6:20 a.m. on September 2nd, 2003, shots were fired at the Johnson home. The Johnsons' next-door neighbor had called 911 and said that the couple's daughter had run over in a panic and said 2 gunshots had been fired, and she believed her parents had been killed. Police rushed to the scene, and once there, they found Diane still in bed, and she had died of a single gunshot wound to the head. It had appeared that Diane was still sleeping when she had been fatally shot. Alan was found lying on the floor next to the bed. He had been killed by a single gunshot wound to the chest. The police had found that the shower was still going, indicating that Alan was up and about and was possibly surprised by the gunman in the shower and had tried to get away. Upon closer examination of the shower, there was a bullet hole found in the tile that was about chest high, as well as a spattering of blood belonging to Alan. When they recovered the bullet, it was determined as having come from a .264 caliber rifle, which was later found lying on the bedroom floor, partially covered by a shirt. There was blood everywhere. When questioned by investigators, Sarah had said that she was asleep in bed and had been woken up by a loud pop, determined to be the first gunshot. After hearing this, she said she had gotten up and rushed to her parents' bedroom and began calling out for her mom. After hearing no response, there was a second gunshot, and after that, she felt unsafe and ran out of the house and went next door, telling the neighbor to call police. When police went to the neighbor's home and spoke with Sarah, she told them that unfortunately, she had not seen the shooter. After hearing the gunshots, she said she was too scared to stay there and made her escape while she could. When police went into the home to survey the scene, they found 2 knives at the foot of Alan and Diane's bed. One was a serrated steak knife, and the other was a long chef's knife. They also found a knife in Matthew's untouched, unslept-in room. Police were beginning to think this might have been gang-related. As we mentioned earlier, this is the type of community where people don't really lock their doors at night, and since the Johnson home was left unlocked, there were no signs of a break-in or forced entry. Presumably, the assailant was able to just walk right in. This makes you think that it might have been someone that the family had known, since they knew the door would have been left open. But then again, there's the possibility that it could have been a total random stranger that knew that many people left their doors unlocked and just so happened to try the Johnsons' door and got lucky. Inside the home, everything appeared to be in order and nothing obvious was missing. This did not appear to be a robbery. The Johnsons had a guest house in their backyard, and at this time, they were renting it out to a tenant named Mel Spiegel. Mel Spiegel was 45 years old and worked as an electrician and had been living in the guest house for many years. Police were eager to speak with him Since Sarah didn't see anything, they thought that he might have. When police entered the guest house, they found on the bed a scope that attached to a rifle, presumably the murder weapon. They called out many times for Mel and looked all over the home, but he was nowhere to be found. Mel was a hunter and had a registered rifle that had matched the scope attachment, and the fact that he was gone just left too much up to suspicion. As of right now, Mel was their number one suspect. But where was he? Thinking fast, the sheriff had ordered the perimeter of the neighborhood to be sealed off. Just then, a garbage truck was making its way around the neighborhood. It hadn't yet collected at the Johnson home and was just one house away. One of the deputies had run up and told the collector not to pick up here. This was a scene currently involved in an investigation. Just skip here and go to the next house. When police looked in the trash can, they found a treasure trove of evidence. In one of the trash cans was a light pink terry robe, a brown leather glove, and a latex glove. They also found several spent .25 caliber shell casings. Interestingly, the .25 caliber casings did not match the bullets used to murder Alan and Diane, which, as you remember, was a hunting rifle. These could have been decoys or completely unrelated. Police eventually found Mel in Boise, Idaho, which was over 150 miles away. He said that he had been there for several days already and had been visiting with his family all weekend. This had been confirmed by several of his family members. When asked about his rifle, he told police that he had left it at home in the guest house, and it was secured away in his closet. He had no use for it this weekend, as he wasn't going on a hunting trip. His primary focus was his family visit. He was then asked who he thought might have gone into his closet and taken it, and he said the name Bruno Santos. Bruno was a 19-year-old from Mexico that had been dating the Johnsons' daughter Sarah. When police looked into Bruno's background, they found that he had several small drug-related charges. As you can imagine, Sarah's parents really didn't like him. In addition to having this criminal record, Sarah was only 16 and still in high school. Her parents were hoping that she would break it off before they had to. Investigators were even more interested when they found out about an earlier confrontation between Alan and Bruno just a few days before the attack. The confrontation that turned into a heated fight occurred after Alan and Diane had found out that Sarah had been spending the night with Bruno when she had actually told them that she was spending the night with one of her friends from school. After learning the truth, Alan and Diane were, of course, furious, and Alan asked his brother-in-law to come along when he told Bruno that the relationship he had with his daughter was over. They had a feeling that he had no intention of ending the relationship and knew Sarah wouldn't listen to them. They then issued Bruno an ultimatum: end the relationship, stay away from Sarah, or they would press charges. Bruno wasn't all that worried until he found out that they were intending on filing a statutory rape charge. Being charged and arrested for this would result in jail time and possibly him being deported back to Mexico. Bruno really wanted to stay in Idaho, and the possibility of these charges weren't worth it to him to get in trouble. He seemed to reconsider the relationship, but reconsider does not mean ended. He continued to see Sarah, which infuriated Alan and Diane. After hearing about the threat of the charges just days before they were killed, police felt that Bruno might have been involved. He was then brought in for questioning. Police noted that he went out of his way to be difficult, and they just continued to talk in circles. He was very arrogant and confrontational, and didn't seem at all concerned that he was sitting in a police station being questioned about a double murder that he was suspected of. At one point during the questioning, he had told a detective that he had proposed to Sarah, and she had accepted. Police felt that he might have been hiding something else, and felt they needed to go to his apartment immediately. When police went to the apartment that he shared with his mother answered the door, and when asked about his whereabouts on the night of the murders, she said that he was at home with her. Although he had this alibi, police still considered Bruno their primary suspect. They believe that because he continued seeing Sarah after the confrontation, in addition to the threat of the statutory rape charge, he wanted to get Sarah's parents out of the way. The attack seemed personal, and who would have greater motive than someone they threatened? Police obtained a search warrant to search Bruno's apartment, and once there, they collected recently worn clothes and shoes, as well as DNA samples. None of Bruno's fingerprints or DNA was found at the crime scene, and when his clothes from the morning of the murders was tested, investigators found none of Diane or Alan's blood on them. It was then that Bruno was eliminated as a suspect. There was no physical evidence connecting him to the crime, so police basically had to start over. Although no longer a suspect, they felt that Bruno certainly had motive, so who else might have had a reason for wanting Alan and Diane gone? Police discovered that Sarah didn't have the best relationship with her parents, mostly due to her relationship with Bruno, but Sarah and Diane had a long, strained relationship. Her relatives thought it was just typical teenage stuff and didn't read too much into it. After her parents' murder, they did feel that she was acting a bit off, though. They noticed that she didn't seem to be grieving at all. And I know everyone grieves differently, and not everyone feels free enough to openly share their emotions, and some people may choose to cry in private and put on a brave face in public, but Sarah was 16, and her emotional maturity wouldn't be the same as an adult. I mean, she just lost both of her parents. They were murdered in the home that she was still in. She was almost the third victim. It just seemed strange that she was showing such a lack of emotion. Okay, you can argue everyone grieves differently, but she wasn't sad at all. She was more concerned with going out with her friends. Investigators were starting to think that Sarah might have been the culprit. This is an extreme possibility and pretty hard to believe, but as time went on, this possibility became more and more plausible. An accusation is one thing, but there were a lot of moving parts to consider. First, she would have had to have access to a gun. We know Mel, the man who lived in the Johnsons' guest house, had a gun that matched the one used during the murders. Sarah would often clean the guest house, so she knew what was inside. Second, she would need access, and the keys to the guest house were easily accessible by anyone in the main house, so Sarah would have definitely had a way to get in. This was enough to bring Sarah in for questioning again, and once speaking with her, police found there to be several inconsistencies with her version of events. During her first questioning, after running to the neighbor's house to get them to call police and report the double murder, she had originally said that she had been asleep and was woken up by the gunshots. She said that after she heard the first shot, she got up and opened the door and yelled for her mom. After hearing the second shot, she fled the house and went next door. Upon investigation, there were traces of Diane's blood and skull fragments found in Sarah's room, which wouldn't make sense since Sarah said her bedroom door was closed. Police found evidence of blood on Sarah's door hinges, and this would only have occurred if the door was open. Why would she have lied about this? I know that sometimes when you experience a traumatic event, your memory might be foggy, but something was telling investigators that there was something more to the story. Police collected Sarah's clothes that she was wearing that morning and tested them for blood, but they found nothing. If you recall, there was a pink bathrobe that was found in the Johnsons' trash, and when tested, boy oh boy did that thing light up. The front was clean, but the back of the robe revealed evidence of blood spatter all over it. DNA testing of the blood spatters found came back as belonging to both Alan and Diane. The evidence pointed to the robe being put on backwards and worn as a shield. Family members confirmed that the robe belonged to Sarah, but was she the one wearing it when her parents had been killed? There was no way to confirm this without further looking into the clothes she was wearing that day. Investigators again examined the clothes she was wearing that day, searching for any fibers that matched the bathrobe. The shirt she was wearing was dyed blue cotton and had several spots of dried green paint on it, so they took samples of the cotton fibers and the paint, hoping to find a match. When they swabbed the inside part of the pink bathrobe, they found particles that matched Sarah's shirt. Finding this confirmed that no one besides Sarah could have worn the bathrobe. The latex glove that was also found in the trash was then swabbed, and the skin cells found on the inside matched Sarah. After examining each of these items for gunshot residue, there was no question. Sarah had to have been the shooter. Investigators believe that Sarah had become increasingly resentful of her parents ever since they put the kibosh on her relationship with Bruno. After the statutory rape charge threat, Sarah was sent over the edge. She had no intention of ending her relationship and felt this would put an end to her parents' meddling. In October 2003, Sarah was arrested and charged with the double murder of her parents. Although she was 16, she was charged as an adult. Her 5-week trial ended up attracting a lot of media attention. During her trial, the prosecution showed all the circumstantial evidence that pins this crime on Sarah and Sarah alone. They showed how she would have worn the pink bathrobe backwards, how she would have set the scene, and how she attempted to get rid of the evidence. Proof that this crime had been premeditated, prosecutors had described how Sarah had waited until Mel had gone out of town to go into the guest house and retrieve his gun from the closet. She had chose to commit these murders early in the morning because there was less neighborhood activity, and she had thrown out the robe and glove, expecting the trash to be collected soon after. While staging the scene, she had left the knives laying out to make the murders appear to have been gang-related, although literally no one believed this. Because she had appeared to be clean and blood-free when she had run next door to the neighbors, they had no reason to believe that she was involved. In addition to living out her dreams with Bruno, she was also counting on receiving a large life insurance payout from her parents' deaths, as well as a sizable inheritance. She felt that with her promise to provide a comfortable life for Bruno, he'd stand by her. However, all that changed when Bruno testified for the prosecution, saying he had nothing to do with the murders and Sarah had acted alone. The circumstantial and physical evidence was too much to deny, and on March 16th, Sarah Johnson was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 2 life terms without the possibility of parole. In addition to this, she was also sentenced to 15 years for illegal possession of a firearm. Around this time, Bruno had been arrested on another drug-related charge and served some time in jail. Later, in 2010, he had sold half a pound of methamphetamine to an undercover officer and received a 10-year sentence for that. As you can probably assume at this point, Sarah and Bruno did not stay together. In 2014, Sarah's lawyer filed a petition for a new trial, arguing that she had ineffective counsel during her first trial. They also argued that since her fingerprints were not found on the murder weapon, this should have exonerated her. They argued that it must have been Mel, since his fingerprints were the only ones found on the gun. I mean, it was his in the first place, and he legally owned it, so of course his fingerprints would be on it. Get real. The request for a new trial was denied in October 2014. Sarah Johnson is currently incarcerated at the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center in Pocatello, Idaho. This was such a devastating case for everyone involved. This needless murder took away 2 lives for absolutely no reason. Let me know your thoughts on this one. Do you believe that Sarah had planned this out and was acting alone? Or do you think Bruno had a heavier involvement than he led to believe? Make reasonable choices and listen to your parents. Matthew was left without parents because his sister was just so stubborn, so heartbreaking and unfair to the rest of their family. And with that, that is all I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.